So you've learned how to burn gradients into your screen, but now when you print them, they're darker than what you expected. That is what is commonly referred to as dot gain, where the dots hit your substrate, expand, and sometimes chain together, making your tones darker and your print darker. I'm Mike from Texsource, and this is Screen Making 103 Dot Gain Control. Over here in Photoshop, we have this grayscale image that we're going to use as the dot gain test file. And so we need to set this up for printing. I'm going to convert this grayscale image to a bitmap, leave it at the 300 halftone screen, and we're going to go with a frequency, which is the LPI, which is the size of the dot, at 40 with an angle of 22.5, and we're going to go for round on the shape of the dots. So as soon as we do that, you can immediately see we have our halftone dots. Now over in Illustrator, I've placed this file, added a couple registration marks, but more importantly, this tint block here that's going to give us a range from 1 to 10, and then as you can see 15, 20, 25, 30, all the way up to 90% on the halftone. We'll print out this film and then we'll burn it into the screen, and when we print, we will compare the film that's created with the print sample down here in the tint blocks, and also how dark this ends up printing on the Pellon. So after completing the art on the computer, I was able to generate a film and burn it out on this 305 mesh with really good exposure. Now the first thing I'm going to do is print this 4 or 5 times on the Pellon, because we obviously want the ink to get flowing a little bit before we judge what we're going to see on the Pellon. And from that 5th Pellon, we're going to look at how dark the halftones went and analyze and see where we want to pull them back so that we can make another attempt at getting a better picture. So I'm using a little process black here, and once again I'm just going to get the ink flowing at first, and then when I feel like it's flowing good for us, then we're going to go ahead and print the Pellon that we'll use as the example. Now some companies have a densitometer to be able to electronically read these, whereas we're just going to have to use our eye and our best judgment. And what we're really shooting for here is to have just one pull of the black and then a nice back flood. If you print it twice, it's really going to gain up a lot. So there's number 3. And it's fair to mention in the land of halftones that the black is notorious for gaining up the most. And so this is the color that we really want to concentrate on. It's not that the other colors aren't gaining, but the black has a tendency to stick out like a sore thumb. And that's because of how dark it is compared to the other colors that you might be printing. So here's number 5 here, and after printing this, I'm going to go run it through the conveyor dryer. And just looking at this with the naked eye, I can see a lot that's going on with this. I mean, I can definitely see that it's really dark. All of this shadow area over here got super dark on us. And yeah, overall, everything's gaining. This 80%, this 90%, all of these, especially this shadow area, really gaining up a lot. Now, I was able to hold highlight dots here at 10 and under, all the way down to some crumbs in the 1, but in the end, we'll probably chase out this lower end here because these halftones don't look really well. And then we'll concentrate on the midtones and the shadow area to drop those back so that when we print this the next time with the dot gain compensation, that we're going to get more of a tonal range in our gradient print here, and it will be more reflective of what the expectation is going to be.
A few moments later.
Okay, now I've got this Pellon cured, and I also have the film here to compare by sitting it next to it. But more than that is I have the gradient bars here that I'm actually going to cut away from the film so that I can lay it right up here on the Pellon, and then it's a matter of just your judgment and eyeballing it. The other thing you can do to try to analyze the dot gain is go back to the original grayscale file before it had halftones, and then set the bitmap TIFF that you created with the 40 LPI on top of that. And you can see that this is how it converted. And now scan that Pellon that you just made and put that on top as well. And if you hide part of the Pellon like this, you can see where it went from this dark area right here on the Pellon to what the original was. So you can see where your problem areas are. So if you look in this area right here where it's sort of dark, but it really goes dark, you're starting to lose all that detail, especially in the midtones and the shadow area. And what I mean by that, midtones and shadow area, is if you pull up the levels here, this shows you where all the color is in the original file. You can see there's no pure white at all, and that only till we get to right here is the lightest of all the areas in the photo. So that would be areas like this in here and a lot of this lighter areas throughout the photo. And then there's almost zero pure 100% black over here. So you can see where the bulk of the colors are. This little indicator down here is the shadow area. This is your midtones, and these are the highlights. So when we're looking back again at the halftone screen, and then the printed halftones on top of it. If we get in here real close, you can see what's going on. See how these dots are bigger here than what they are here. Now, some of that could be the way your films were output. So if you have a consistent film output, then that's what you're going to expect to see. But not only did these dots get bigger here, but you can tell that this halftone here, how it started to fill in the other direction. So you really begin to see what's going on the press. It was explained to me back in the 80s that doing dot gain compensation, it was taking the crust off of the pizza. So making this little dot smaller so that when it printed, that it would gain back up to what your expectations were. Since most of the dot gain was happening in the midtones and the shadow areas, that's where I'm going to concentrate the most on. And if you don't know where to start after doing your analysis, there is a good starting place that a lot of people will use, and that is called the 80-60 curve. And if you pull up the curves menu, once again, you're seeing a histogram here. It's sort of flipped backwards from the levels, but you're seeing the shadow ends and you're seeing the highlight ends. And to do an 80-60 curve, you just click on this line right here. And I just happened to click at 80 just by dumb luck. But even if I'm going to undo that, or let me actually just move that down. Let's say I clicked right here. You can always put your input at 80 and then put your output at 60. Okay? And you see what's happened here is it's brought in this curve and it has curved everything back. So if we click another point in here, you can tell that a 53 is now a 25. Now, one thing for sure you want to do is go down here in the highlight area and click. You don't want your 9s going down to a 2 because you won't really be able to see what's going on with those. That will create these highlight dots that are going to be very difficult to hold or maintain. So typically what I do is make the 9 a 9. Now, when I did that, it also flattened out this curve a little bit. It didn't make it as extreme as it was before. And so if I'm happy with this 50 going down to 25, it's almost cutting it in half. If you want to change that, I'm going to do 50 down to 25. And then let's go see where the 90's at. The 90 goes down to an 80. Now, if you do the 90 to an 80, then if we look at our halftone chips, the 80 almost printed completely solid. So that's still not enough. So you might take and drag this. See what's going on here? I'm dragging this 90. Let me switch it to 90. Let me take this down to 75, or better yet, 70. We just have to click on these points and see where they're at. Now, this is a curve that may or may not work for your scenario or situation. You might want to pull another area in here. But definitely as we get towards the highlights, you're going to have a lot less of the gain because the dots are further apart and don't have a tendency to chain together. So at this point, I'm okay with what this curve is going to do to this file. If you turn the preview on and off, you can also see the difference that you're putting in here. Now, truth be said, over here in this really dark area, will that probably end up gaining back to 100%? Yeah, it probably will. Those shadow areas are really tough to control. But hopefully this area here will be a lot better when we turn around and burn another screen. So with that being said, I've got my proposed curve in here. This is attempt number 1 at doing this. I still have all these other files on the layers here. So I'm actually going to save this as a Photoshop file first. And now I'll ditch the other 3 layers and then go back to switching this to a bitmap 300 halftone screen. Our settings are still in there from last time, and hit OK. Now, as you can see, this is a lot lighter than what the first file was, which was this one right here. So you see the difference we've got going on here. Now it's time to print this, burn another screen, and then we can see what our results are going to be. Okay, we're back on press now, and I have the new screen burned. It's actually the same exact screen as I was using before, reclaimed, recoded the same, and then gave the same identical exposure. So we'll see what we get with this curve. Now, full disclosure, I've actually printed this a few times to see what I was going to get, because if it was a complete and utter failure, then I was going to have to redo it anyway. I would have shown the failure and then we would have gone through the corrections. But I want to show you what I got. So I'm going to do just a single back flood and then just a single hit. Okay, so this, I'm hoping the lights won't wash it out too much, but this is much, much better. This is a lot closer than what the original print was as far as how dark this went. In fact, on the bottom here, this is going to be the uncurved. And then you see the print that I just made here. It is a lot better. We've got a lot of contrast in the face. We can see the textures, and even this shadow area here is not 100%, which I thought was going to fill up. And it may fill in if you were printing a bunch of these. It's eventually going to go solid. But this looks really close to what I have on screen, so I'm pretty pleased with it. Now, with all that being said, the truth of the matter is this is an ongoing process. This isn't something that you just say, okay, here's what it is, and you just save your curves, and every time you do it, you're just going to get the perfect results on the press. Every time you do a job with halftones, or a CMYK process, or spot separations, as the art department, you're going to go out and see what's happening on press, because sometimes the job will go bust, sometimes you'll have to make an adjustment on just one step, but you really need to be involved in this whole process, and it is ongoing. That's the point, is this never ends. You're always going to be chasing these dots around, trying to get the best results. And over time, it's going to become easier and easier to know what you're going to get on the press by looking at the art. In the end, I hope that this video has helped you and will push you in the right direction and give you confidence when it comes to printing gradients and doing this dot gain control so that you get what you see on the screen on the press. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video series here from Texsource.